driving up here, you can see the walls from a long ways away, and it's just such an incredibly beautiful location and such an ugly, grim place.
Welcome to San Quentin, ladies and gentlemen. My name is George McKinney. I'm the senior tour guide for San Quentin. I'm an inmate.
Every Wednesday at 12 noon, they open the gates at San Quentin and allow the public an inside look at one of the nation's most well-known prisons. All the tour guides are inmates. George McKinney is serving a life sentence for first-degree murder.
I have to explain the no hostage policy, which we do have in California. It's strictly no hostage policy. If you are taken as a hostage, you will be bargained for, but it's not an automatic release. But if anybody feels a little antsy about it, do not enter.
The no hostage policy means prison authorities will make every attempt to win the release of a visitor captured by inmates, but they won't set a prisoner free in exchange for the visitor's freedom.
The tour is under the guidance of prison historian Nicola Fry.
The tours have always been run by inmates. We've always felt that the inmates are the ones who know the institution best. We don't tell them what to say. The only thing that we ask for them to do is that whatever they say it so that it's honest. They can say anything they want about San Quentin, and they do frequently.
The first place the visitors are taken is the gas chamber, which was built in 1937. Since then, 194 convicts have been put to death here. The most recent execution was in 1967.
When they strap a man in the chair, there are 8 straps that they put on. You can see a little apparatus down here that's on a swivel. They have a little fishnet-like bag that has ping pong ball-sized cyanide tablets. And underneath the chair, they have a dish of hydrochloric acid, and the little pellets drop into the hydrochloric acid and release the cyanide fumes. It takes approximately 30 to 35 seconds to lose consciousness and approximately 8.5 to 12 minutes in order to die when you're under gas. The gas shuts off their nervous system and they can't breathe.
For the past 2.5 years, Nicola Fry has been delving into San Quentin's past, checking through old record books and even photo albums of the thousands of inmates who have lived here.
We've had all kinds of prisoners. We've had bandits, we've had highwaymen, we've had hatchet killers, we've had notorious people, we've had inmates who names are well known: Sirhan, Charles Manson, Black Bart. He was a highwayman, robbed stages, Wells Fargo stages in the 1890s, came to San Quentin because he was caught because of a laundry mark on a handkerchief left at the scene of a robbery. Came to San Quentin, never admitted his guilt, left, was paroled, and disappeared. Although shortly later, robberies that were attributed to him started again, but could never be found again.
I'm going to tell you what the largest massive escape was in San Quentin's history. It happened in 1863. 300 inmates escaped from the rock quarry over against this hill. They overpowered their guards, went off into the wilderness. There was no houses around then. 250 guys made it to freedom.
It started as a prison ship. It was a ship that was doing public work projects around San Francisco Bay shortly after the gold rush in 1849. The ship was docked along the edge here in an area known as the Bay of Skulls, and decided to build the prison right where the ship was docked. There are interesting names attached to a lot of places around San Quentin. We have Graveyard Point. We have Dolores Way, which was named for Dolores Martinez, one of the first women inmates here, who ran a house of ill repute in San Francisco on the Barbary Coast, who also ran a house and a bar on San Quentin's prison property.
I'll go in front of Lady Kate, yeah.
The inmates we have at San Quentin are inmates who are here because they have high escape risks, they are in for violent crimes, they need gun coverage, they need high walls, they need barbed wire, and they need single and double cells.
Where are we now?
Okay, this is West Block. This used to be the incentive for the guys around the institution to come over here and for like being disciplinary free, you get all kinds of free running time. They leave you alone a lot around over here, and now it's just being used as a workers unit. Most of the guys over here double cell.
Got a tour on the way, tour on the way, tour on the way, tour. What else? This is your cell here. See how small this is?
They, in 1910, started constructing what was known as the new prison. It was a new facility, a way of housing prisoners that was considered to be more humane. And our cell blocks now are those blocks that were built then, 1910, 1927, 1929, and 1936.
West Block is home for nearly half of San Quentin's 3,000 convicts. Willie Cleveland is serving a life sentence for first-degree murder.
It's not very big, is it?
It's not. I mean, small as I am, I can't stretch my hands all the way out. And my cellie, he weighs about 180 pounds. And when he comes in, I either have to be on his bunk, up on my bunk, so he can come through and take care of his little deals he got to do.
What sort of relationship do you have with the inmates? They've seen you now for 2.5 years, you know, you talk to them, etc. How do they see you?
It took me about a year of working in San Quentin to reach a level of confidence with inmates and with staff. I came in as an unknown quantity. I was a historian, something that never appears inside of a prison. It took me a very long time for them to know me, to know that what I was doing here, I was doing as honestly as I possibly could. I'm working on a book about San Quentin. It is not going to be from the administration point of view. It's not going to be from the inmate point of view. It is going to be from an honest point of view, an observer looking at the prison with no axe to grind, nothing to bury, and nothing to hide.
Unfortunately, you have the policymakers don't have any idea of what's going on inside here. They have no conception of what
That seems to be one of your biggest complaints.
Yeah.
This is the only public tour conducted at a maximum security prison anywhere in the nation. It has become so popular, it is booked up 6 months in advance. As many as 40 people are taken through San Quentin every week.
You do have to be very cautious at all times. You know where you are at any time, you know who's talking to you at any time, who might be walking up behind you at any time. You look at what an inmate says to you and you think about it. You don't take things on face value. You consider what they're saying, why they might be saying it, what they might be looking for. I grew up in a very liberal atmosphere. I thought that maybe there was another solution to crime besides prison, a way of doing something with criminals. I was violently opposed to the death penalty. After being in San Quentin and finding out what the crimes really are like, finding out what it means to have someone perpetuate a crime on another person, I've changed my attitude. I'm not sure prison is so much the answer, but maybe it's the only one we know at this point.
The focus here in Cuba seems to be more than most places living life. making everything they can out of it every minute. You come back here and you get a really special sense that you're really seeing life at work. Yeah.
Jim Richardson is back in town, taking more pictures. There's Charlie Andrews, the town barber. Jim Richardson's been taking pictures of him for 8 years.
Kind of break the soil up some?
Pardon?
Does it kind of break the soil up some?
Oh, yeah.
Hey, come out here and sit down. You! Okay. Sit down there so I can get a few pictures of you while you're at it.
Over at Wes Klima's gas station, Wes and his buddy Emil Macaluse are letting another quiet day drift by. They're used to Jim's camera, too.
That's good.
At the Mustang Inn, a gathering place of Cuba, Kansas, some of the high school kids are having a celebration lunch. Tonight, they'll be graduating. And, of course, Jim Richardson will be there.
I didn't know what the hell you thought. I heard that. I thought you were speeding or something.
His vocation is staff photographer, the Denver Post. His deepest interest is in the lives of the 300 people of Cuba, Kansas, 150 miles north of Wichita. He has spent years documenting those lives. Jim Richardson grew up not far from here. Of all the small towns he's ever known, he knows Cuba, Kansas best.
I was really surprised. I never expected anything like that when I started coming here.
He's only taken about 30,000 pictures here since 1975 or something like that. So.
Well, I hope there's some good ones.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember what pictures I've gotten you in. But everybody here seems to have this kind of a blueprint in the back of their minds. Not conscious, not something they do every day. They don't get up in the morning and decide that they're going to make a perfect small town. No, it's just something that's almost ingrained in them. It's almost elemental, back of their minds, that this is the way a town ought to be, that it ought to look like this. It ought to be the kind of place where kids can go anywhere they want, and everyone who is around will take care of them. And that's what they want. And so they kind of go about making it up as they go, I guess. Well, I'm not unbiased about this town. I want it to succeed. I want the lives of these people to go on. But I do like them, and I want to show them for exactly what they are, and exactly as good and worthy as they are.
Doc McClaskey was one good and worthy man. Jim Richardson took the pictures when they made Doc McClaskey Man of the Year at the Harvest Festival, took the pictures when they gathered together everyone the doctor had delivered, took the pictures the day they buried Doc. He photographed and wrote about the charm and goodness of a Presbyterian minister who spent 3 years among Cuba's people. This is an essay Jim Richardson put together about the Reverend Karen Cokeless. She took on counseling, both formal and otherwise. Kids sought her out with problems. Should I join the Air Force or should I go to college? Adults poured out their problems. And always there were hospital calls. To Laurie Stranand, whose ankle was recovering nicely, to praying with Art Barton before the operation. Finally, it came time to go to another church, and everybody hated to see her go. There was a going-away dinner, and hundreds came. They named her Super Preach. She got to see her favorite kids graduate and to deliver their benediction, and hug them all before it was time to go. But there was one more wondrous baptism, her favorite ceremony. Touch the child with a rose and water, hold him to the congregation, and proudly announce, This is Timothy Lee Talkington. He is your brother.
When do you guys make up your mottos? When you're seniors?
Yeah.
I mean, the first year, or when you have to because graduation's coming up? That's what I thought.
High school graduation day in Cuba. Another day to record.
Looking right in here into the lens. That's fine, just like that.
Lisa Chisek and her mother were getting ready for the big night. Sean Woolsey got in some chores before dressing up. So did Delton Graves.
That thing that winds it.
If it tore an arm off, and he just bleed to death like that. He was out there by himself.
Graduation night. Before marching into the gym, the kids heard that a recent graduate, a young man several of them knew, had been killed that day in a farm accident. Jim Richardson made his photographs.
It's tough to see other people that you do know and like reacting so strongly and not feel it also. But I think they know that I'm here for better or worse, that I'm going to do everything, I'm going to catch all of life about them, and I'm not going to stop because of this. It's tough not to walk away and cry yourself, but you have to do it.
When you hear Jim Richardson talk about the people in Cuba, Kansas, about the children they raised here, you understand why he comes back year after year to record ordinary American lives in such a persistent way.
It's a hard thing to contemplate that the place that they've built, that they want to have for their kids, is not the future they hope for their kids. I mean, they're cognizant, they know what the economy's like there, they know what the future of their children will be here in many cases. And I think it is tough because here they are working their hearts out to build a place that they want their children to be proud of, and then when they grow up, very often they decide that they really shouldn't stay here, they should go on someplace else. But at least they know what the trade is, they know what they're sacrificing, and they know what the rewards are too. You know, even if they move away and Cuba's blown away in the wind, they've still got that background that they grew up in a place where people were concerned and wanted them to do well.
Would you guys do me a favor and put these stands at least over here for now?
Last June, Roberta Tavares was busy. She was getting ready for her students' year-end violin concert.
No, is there another one? Bellies that way, beginners, knees straight. When we play our first note, all 120 together at the dress rehearsal, that is the most wonderful moment. And it's just so funny to watch their expressions when they hear the first couple of twinkles by all 120 children together. Is just fantastic. No, you missed it. Robert, I don't see you. Aim at me. Look at me. You don't have to look at your fingers.
Roberta Guaspari Tavares may be smiling on the inside, but she doesn't let up on her violin students for a minute.
3.
This, after all, is the day they've been practicing for months. For Roberta Tavares, the end of one school year means she can begin getting her students ready for the next year's concert.
And some of you maybe didn't practice over the summer or weren't able to or did a little bit of practicing, so we've got to get back in shape again. Wait.
Tavares has perfected her own teaching style over the past 13 years, tailored to the reality of large inner-city classes.
I have to maintain their interest and their focus.
What do you think is the most effective way of getting their attention when they're a little restless?
Well, I do use a loud voice. This time, watch! So we don't get off. The pizzicato can be more together. What happens is I speak to them while they're playing. So while all 14 or 16 kids are playing, I'm correcting individuals. I can't afford to stop and say something critical to one child and have all of them put their instruments down. Okay, good. Thank you. Nice work, you guys.
The violin program that began with 30 students now includes 120 students in 3 East Harlem elementary schools, Central Park East 1 and 2 and the River East School.
And my name is Roberta, and I'm going to teach you violin this year.
For these students in their very first violin class, the year-end concert must seem a lifetime away. Most of them have never even touched a violin.
Does anyone here know what the word posture means?
Being in Roberta's violin class is such a mark of distinction that a lottery has to be held for the first and second graders to see who can take the class.
I like starting them young enough. They don't know any better. At least they don't know that it can be difficult. They really come into the first classes just filled all with enthusiasm and eagerness to know everything about the violin. How many strings do you see here on this violin?
3 years ago, Roberta Tavares thought she might not be teaching her violin students anymore. School budget cutbacks meant that there was not enough money to support the program.
Exactly, watch. I guess they couldn't very well cut out the 3rd grade. So in that sense, you know, someone had to go.
Parents and other volunteers came to the rescue. They formed the Opus 118 Music Center to raise the funds needed to keep the violin program going.
He would like us to think about some different ways that they could support us. They wouldn't necessarily give just a monetary contribution.
I know it's not a luxury. There is such a discipline that it takes to play an instrument or to be very serious in dance or drama, that's transferred to whatever we do, whatever we learn. It's about perseverance and a commitment and not giving up.
I started playing the violin when I was in 1st grade. I didn't really like it that much because we didn't get to take the violin home. And then when I got to take it home, then I really got into playing the violin. And so now I'm happy with it.
Malia Crumbley has been playing the violin for 6 years. Wendy Castaneda, who has been playing the violin for 3 years, was inspired by her sister, who was in the program before her.
Legato!
Well, my parents never played an instrument, so my sister was the first one to play an instrument, then my brother, then now me.
One way to measure the strength of the program is here at the Juilliard School. All young New York City public school students can audition for the Music Advancement Program. And of the 18 string students in the program, 16 study with Tavares.
We're here today because, in a way, what Tavares is doing.
Last Thursday, Isaac Stern announced a benefit concert for Roberta Tavares' violin program to take place at Carnegie Hall.
We are grateful for people who care about other children.
Some of Roberta Tavares' students will play with some of the world's greatest musicians on the world's greatest stage. Roberta Tavares has taught her students a love of music and the discipline needed to reach their goals. But she too has learned a few things along the way.
Stop right there, up bow, oh. That I need to learn to be patient at all times. It takes a lot of patience to teach violin to so many children, and that the children really want you to be hard on them. They want you to care.
Stop right here. Don't scratch this floor. That
was good. Remember those students who had never played a violin before? Well, last Thursday night was their chance to be in the annual violin concert in the school auditorium. And for a few hours, each one of them felt like the world's greatest musician on the world's greatest stage.
We consider an island this morning about 100 square miles in area, lying south of Cape Cod in the Atlantic. It's easily reached from the mainland by ferry, and yet, along with some locations much more remote, this island is on a list compiled by the Nature Conservancy of the places on Earth most worth saving. Luckily, these 100 square miles already have something of a resident savior. It is a beautiful place, and on summer weekends at the ferry dock, it sometimes seems that everybody on the east coast of the United States is trying to get to Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts. And yet, parts of the island still look like this. For that, you can thank a handful of people like Gus Ben David.
Square mile on Martha's Vineyard is just as important as maybe 1,000 square miles in the Amazon basin. Martha's Vineyard is a victim of her own beauty.
Preserving that beauty has been Gus Ben David's life work. Not many of us have a life work that is so subtle or so satisfying.
The decisions that wildlife managers have to make today are not easy. Wildlife managers today have to understand people. They have to understand the culture of an area in order to productively manage wildlife. If you go too far one way or the other, you have a backlash effect.
Mr. David knows a little bit about politics, too, and persuasion, and wildlife education. As the manager for most of his adult life of the Audubon Society's Felix Neck Wildlife Sanctuary, he has learned to be a voice of reason.
Fine line, fine balance. Typical situation with a piping plover right now. Takes a lot of maturity, a lot of diplomacy, a lot of understanding, and a lot of education to protect those plovers. It's not just simply close everything down.
The piping plovers are an endangered species. At this time of year, the birds nest in the sand of the Vineyard's southern barrier beach. The beach is now temporarily closed to recreational vehicles. That's something that has to be explained to the fishermen and the beachgoers.
Here on the Trustees of Reservations, what we're trying to do is protect the birds and also provide for public access. And over the past
Tom Chase manages part of the beach for a conservation group.
These birds compete, in a sense, for the same habitats that we as humans prefer so much. But when you look at it, you have to ask yourself, just what is it about these very spectacular landscapes that are so important? And in a sense, it is these little things. So we're at a point now in conservation where we just don't want to lose any more of what we have.
I have begun to see people accepting the situation, where 6 months ago they were totally confrontational. Now they're saying, look, you know, we have the beach the rest of the time. If we've got to put up with it for a few weeks, let's accept that so that we can keep the quality of life. And the quality of life, part of it is the variety of wildlife that we have here.
The variety of wildlife, that's what really interests Gus Ben David. School children are regular visitors to his Felix Neck sanctuary.
Education, okay? It's very important. What we're going to do, boys and girls, you're actually going to see an endangered species this morning. It is a bird, and a great bird, a big bird. And it is the symbol of this great United States of ours. And I think most of you know what it is. It is the bald eagle, that's right. So I've been working around birds of prey since I was probably 9 years old. And this particular golden eagle, okay, more so than other eagles that I've had, has lots of gold even on her wings. Chamele has gold even all the way up here. You can see the gold. Of course, these birds are all federally and state protected. You have to have the proper licenses. You have to be experienced. But I use these birds for education.
The island's conservationists think education is the key. So the children get to study the special places of this special place. Like the sand plains, unique to the south shore of the Vineyard.
This is what modern sandplain grasslands look like, which is pretty shrubby. You can see there's...
David Faber is an 8th grade science teacher.
This has been burned a year ago, and the grass does fine. In fact, burn promotes healthy grasslands. That's the whole idea of the burn, is to try to keep down the woody plants.
They're beginning to use controlled burning on the Vineyard to bring the sand plains back to what they were a century ago.
We have volunteers and we have trained crew and equipment available to bring fire back to its natural role in the landscape. Which
Ecologist Tom Chase.
It brings so much of the wildflowers back much more vigorously, and many of the insects and some plants actually require the heat of the fire to continue their life cycle. Some of the best and largest parcels of sandplain left in the world are here in Martha's Vineyard, and that's why this place is so special.
A couple of months ago, the Vineyard Gazette had a big story. The Nature Conservancy had chosen the island of Martha's Vineyard as one of the 40 great places in the world worth saving.
Yeah, we couldn't believe it. I mean, here this list of all, and this we ran a big map.
Shaw is a photographer for the Vineyard Gazette.
Page of the Gazette, and to see these places dotted all over the world, and there we were. There was little Martha's Vineyard with its sand plains, which is also a habitat that I think people on the island are just learning about it now, and there's much more consciousness of it.
And when that consciousness lags, Gus Ben David will be right there to remind people.
A couple of wood ducks hiding away that went around the corner there. just beautiful in here.
If you think one man can't accomplish anything for the world of nature, here's something to think
As far as
about.
we know, going way back in the early 1900s, there were never more than 5 pair of ospreys on Martha's Vineyard. In those days, the vineyard people, and in general the culture of New England, viewed all hawks as chicken hawks, and the osprey was included. They shot them. They actually shot them.
In 1971, some of his friends helped Gus Ben David erect his first osprey pole. One mating pair returned, then another, then another. A few months ago, Mr. David put up pole number 104.
It has been a phenomenal wildlife saga. People in the vineyard love these ospreys. They're a harbinger of spring, and where you have anticipation. And when they leave in the fall, people are sad, sort of like all the little things that happen in life.
Gus is really unique to the island. There aren't a bunch of Gus's by any stretch of the imagination.
I have never entertained the thought, even for a second, of ever leaving Martha's Vineyard. I was born and raised here, and it has everything.
Many years ago, the great old editor Henry Beadle Huff wrote this in the Vineyard Gazette. The mainland is all right in its way, but its way is necessarily imperfect. Only an island has a shoreline that never ends, and that is yet a present fact rather than a distant understanding. Only an island has the sea intimacy and the level, friendly gaze of a really wise horizon.
Do shell script, date.
These may look like ordinary computer nerds.
I'm going to call it Geek Dilbert.
And this may look like an ordinary computer seminar.
And then we're going to display it in the window. Are you ready?
But there's one little detail that makes it a bit unusual. These computer nerds are having this computer seminar at sea on a cruise ship to the Pacific Islands. Now, you've got to be a pretty hardcore geek to attend a seminar like this one. After all, it's not exactly local.
I'm from Dayton, Ohio. And I'm from Woodland Hills, California.
Battle Creek, Michigan.
I'm from Holland. I'm from Bavaria, Germany.
This is our honeymoon.
And it's not exactly cheap.
The cruise itself is about $2,300. The convention is $1,000.
By the time you're done, you're looking at, probably about $4,000, maybe up to $5,000.
But then again, this is an extremely dedicated group. These are Apple Macintosh fans. They know all too well that their computer represents less than 5% of U.S. computer sales. They're an oppressed minority.
Hey, Will, can I get a photo with you?
So for them, this isn't just a computer conference. It's a chance to spend a week with kindred spirits, fellow members in the cult of Macintosh.
I'm a Mac geek.
But even if they have only 5% of the market, they've got 95% of the passion. These are people who develop emotional bonds with their computers.
My wife and I have jokingly referred to this as our, next addition or into the family.
They even name them.
Okay, I'd like you to meet Toto. My first Macintosh was a Macintosh LC, so of course I named it Elsie.
The second Mac I had was a Duo, and I named it Voyager.
And then this, of course, is PowerThing G4. And Glenda and Dorothy are the two drives on my G4 at home.
Stephen Ragatz didn't just bring his Mac to the cruise. He brought his whole family and all of their Macs. Plenty of families on cruise ships spend time sitting on deck and chatting. This one does its chatting electronically, sending instant messages.
For me, there's two big advantages of iChat over talking. I can talk to each individual separately without everybody else seeing or hearing. Number two, I can listen to my music while I'm chatting with people.
Now, this cruise isn't just about sitting around talking about bits and bytes. Every other day or so, the ship stops at an island port, so both geeks and non-geeks can get a closer look at tropical life. Like Fanning Island, 1,200 miles from Hawaii, a place so remote there's no internet access. The geeks have no choice but to relax, shop, and have actual contact with other human beings. Sometimes sacrifices must be made. On other stops, the participants can sign up to ride a helicopter, hike up a volcano, or tour a giant telescope nearly 3 miles above sea level.
The light then bounces down through this hole here in the center of the primary mirror.
They've got it pointed at the apartment across the street. There's plenty to do when the ship is at sea, too, like musical shows, dancing, and your choice of 3 pools. Heck, I killed half a day just riding up and down the glass elevators. But if you're looking for the Mac heads, well, most of them are probably out surfing. Web surfing, that is. $225 buys you all the wireless internet access you can stand. And these folks can stand a lot of it.
For our anniversary, he gave me an unlimited internet account on the ship.
So what makes Mac fans crazy enough that they'd come all the way to a cruise ship for a get-together?
Start it up, and the Mac smiles at you. And then you smile back, and you've got a connection there, and everything's great from then on, especially with its user-friendliness. Windows machines, no Windows machine ever smiled at me.
For these Mac maniacs, the Pacific Islands live up to their reputation of being paradise. No, not because of the glittering seas, the perfect sunshine, and the breathtaking vistas. Because of the wireless network, the celebrity authors, and the Star Trek convention that happens to be on the same cruise. Now that's paradise.
Good to be sharing this one with you.
I can see Hawaii anytime I want, but the meeting up with the Mac people is a far rarer occasion for me.
Also, there's an awful lot of really smart Mac people here, and they can't get off the boat.
As for me, well, I'm just here to teach a few classes and maybe see the world. I'm not a geek. I would never develop an emotional attachment with a hunk of silicon and metal. Well, much.
Time hasn't really stood still in the hills of Tuscany, merely found its own pace, measured by the processes that have made the region famous and cannot be hurried. The time it takes for the sun to ripen the grapes that end up in the barrels that age the wine known as Chianti, for example. And processes that have no use for the computer-driven information age have naturally led to a complementary movement in urban areas. It's called, naturally enough, slow cities.
We just try to share with others what we think is the best for us.
Alessandra Moletti spent 8 years in New York and came back to work in the town of Greve when the mayor decided to join the Slow Cities movement. Slowly, of course.
To order things, it's not right. We have to try to make people understand what is right or not, or what is your idea, and try to convince in a slow and sweet way.
Her boss, Mayor Paolo Santernino, signs papers over a midday glass of wine in the central piazza. I decided that in this time of globalization we needed to do something how to, you say, ameliorate it, he says. Globalization is inevitable, His Honor adds. You can deal with it by annulling your identity or by preserving it. Having an identity steeped in history helps. Giovanni da Verrazzano, the navigator who discovered the site where New York City stands, was born in this villa in the hills above Greve. 3 stones in the wall are from the base of the bridge that bears his name over the Narrows. American tourists love to come to Greve to slow down. Chicago high school teachers Ken and Susan Muir can attest to that.
Even in Sonoma and Napa, when you're in the United States,
you think you go there and everything is slow moving. And then you come here and you realize what really relaxation means. If you come here, you know.
Slow Cities is a natural extension of the slow food movement, founded years ago to counter the invasion of American fast foods into the Italian lifestyle. A quiet revolt against the smell of burger joints in the piazza. You get the same smells everywhere, Mayor Saturnino laments. But here, he enthuses, you breathe a different air. The air inside the 300-year-old Forlani butcher shop is redolent with the spices that add flavor to its unique salami. Gianni Forlani says it takes 15 minutes to make just one of these, as opposed to 30 seconds for a machine-stuffed salami.
And no good fat, thick.
But even minus the no-good fat, strict Food and Drug Administration rules keep them from being sold in the U.S.
Only the people have a holiday here, take 1, 2, 3 in the baggage is possible, but not possible big business.
That's much to the dismay of tourists like Jeannie Davis, who want to try everything.
I think it's wonderful. I really do. I wish they had more of these back in the States, really.
You'd like to see this in Des Moines, Iowa.
Oh, I'd love it. Yeah, yeah.
The pigs which become the salami are very slow cities too. The unique Tuscan breed takes nearly twice as long to become barely 2/3 as fat as normal pigs. And strange as it may seem, taking time to do things, chat, or just watch life go by is something that has to be worked at and earned.
Slow cities may be about tradition, but it is not an attempt to go back to the good old days because, frankly, there weren't any here. In times past, Tuscany was a place of poverty, toil, and disease. Taking it easy was a luxury few, if any, could afford.
Now that most people can, the benefits would seem to be obvious.
Babies are happier here. They can go around, they can go with the bike in the middle of the square. Everybody knows everybody.
Of course, it would be even better if cars were banned from the main piazza. But if you're going to run a slow city, you have to make changes, well, slowly.
The mayor is thinking about that since 10 years.
During which time there have been an admirable number of fine vintage wine years. Lots of happy tourists. Although it's certainly not a pace people here think every city should adopt.
No. We like New York like is it. Have to be like that because we like to go there and go fast.
But that's just for a break, because when it comes to actually living life, a slow city seems to be a concept ideally suited to the timeless processes of Tuscany.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour.
It ranks among our greatest human endeavors, going to the moon.
Houston, you're a go for landing, over.
It was a staggering feat of engineering.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
But one that carried with it astronomical risks.
We got a bunch of guys about to turn blue.
Godspeed, John Glenn.
The men of NASA's Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo programs were indeed national heroes. But they were husbands and fathers, too. And the wives who stayed behind while their other halves explored other worlds were part of a sisterhood with an orbit all its own.
I think we girls all shared something that no other group of women shared in history. I have a scrapbook for each flight.
Marilyn Lovell was in the headlines right along with her husband, astronaut Jim Lovell.
And this is where we find out exactly where we are in space.
In 1968, he was the command module pilot on Apollo 8.
It makes you realize just what you have back there on Earth.
But Apollo 8 isn't why they make movies about Jim Lovell.
Houston, we have a problem.
His heroism, later depicted by Tom Hanks, helped avoid disaster aboard Apollo 13.
You see, and it looks to me, looking out the hatch, that we are inventing something.
But it was no movie for Marilyn Lovell.
Okay, now let's everybody keep cool.
For 4 days, in April of 1970, every agonizing moment of her husband's dire situation was playing out not only in Marilyn's living room, but across the country.
The only goal of Apollo 13, to get the men home safely.
NASA expected her and all the wives to be as calm and brave as the astronauts themselves.
Throughout the day, a steady stream of friends to the homes of astronauts Lovell and Hayes.
As the years went on, I thought, what would I have done if I had become a widow? I mean, what would I have done?
Did you talk about it as a couple?
I think it was unspoken.
It was. This is the business I was in, and she became my wife, and she understood the business I was in, and that was it.
From his earliest days as an astronaut, his career came first. Even when Marilyn found herself pregnant, she hid it from him for 4 months, fearing that it might ruin his chances of going to the moon.
And I went, let's see, 4 months, 5, 6, 7. You're going to be having the baby while I'm in space. And don't say anything.
If it all sounds like the astronaut version of Mad Men, well, it was, says author Lily Capel.
They weren't being flung into space, but they were dealing with the stress of having their husband ride this giant rocket where no man had ever gone before, and also sort of projecting the perfect American family image.
She's compiled many of their very real wives' tales into a new book.
Each woman, I think, dealt with the mission of having a husband in space on her own terms.
Jeannie and Charlie Bassett bought the house, one house down from us, and built it.
The wives, like Sue Bean, once married to Apollo 12 astronaut Alan Bean, used to live close to one another.
Buzz and Joan lived right behind us. There was a gate that I could walk through. And
you guys would always come back and forth?
Across, go and have tea in the afternoon with her.
In the late 1960s, this neighborhood outside Houston was kind of a space suburbia.
My children loved it, and their friends were here.
The husbands were rarely home, and when they were, many of the wives knew they were competing with the moon for attention.
I became pretty independent living by myself with the children because the fellows didn't have time to do the checkbook. They didn't have time to do the yard very often.
None of them did, right?
There was too much training.
So in that sense, you were all in the same...
Yeah, we were all in the same boat.
We gathered Sue and 3 other Astra wives together.
There were certain things you couldn't do. You know, you couldn't go outside in your bathrobe. You had to be dressed, and you had to have your makeup on and your hair combed.
Couldn't get drunk at a party.
And you couldn't drink too much.
Jeannie Bassett Robinson had proudly been astronaut Charlie Bassett's wife. Jane Dreyfus was once married to Pete Conrad, the 3rd man on the moon. And Barbara Cernan Butler is the former wife of Gene Cernan, the last man on the moon. How much of a pressure was there to be the perfect American family?
Well, I think we knew we had to be because we didn't want to have anything upset our husbands' flights. We all wanted our husbands to be the first, or at least we wanted them to be sure and be up there at the top of the list.
And a good, happy marriage sort of ensured where you were in the flight?
It would certainly help.
Was that hard? I mean, were you always sort of watching your P's and Q's?
Perfect. What you
No.
They can laugh about it now. 3, 2. But the stress of knowing, or sometimes not knowing, the danger their husbands were in took a toll each and every day. One of the wives had said that they tried not to have arguments because
Yes,
you weren't
true.
worried.
Because you wouldn't want to have him go off and be killed, and you left on that note of being an argument. You never would argue.
So that was consciously...
Absolutely, always in the back of my mind.
But how did you deal with that?
Well, you just put it way back in the file cabinet. And then when it happens, it's...
You face it.
You face it. You have to cope with it.
Jeannie learned to cope early. Her husband, Charlie Bassett, was training for Gemini 9 when he died in a plane crash, along with fellow astronaut Elliot C. The first people at Jeannie's house that day weren't from NASA. They were other wives.
America's first 3 Apollo astronauts were trapped and killed by a flash.
In 1967, they raced to each other's side after the Apollo 1 tragedy, too, when 3 astronauts lost their lives in a fire during a routine test. What words of comfort did you have? What did you say?
I don't know that you have
You
to
don't say
anything.
anything.
Just,
You don't know what
your
to say.
presence means so much to them. I mean, we were really close.
But while the wives have remained close to this day, most of their marriages fell apart.
We were just young and inexperienced and not ready for a lot of it.
In fact, only a handful of astronaut marriages lasted. Jim and Marilyn Lovell are one of the lucky ones.
Hold on to them.
They just celebrated their
Like a-
61st anniversary this month.
Like a,
The moon may have gone to his head, but it also went to his heart, too.
And it's right there on the coast of the Sea of Tranquility, right there.
Wow. He actually named part of the moon after Marilyn.
I thought to myself, that would be a good little mountain to name after my wife.
And then there was the Christmas present he sent to her doorstep while he was still in space.
and of course I opened it and it was a mink jacket.
A mink jacket?
With a little card in there saying, Merry Christmas for the man in the moon.
That's class.
That was...
No guy is ever going to be able to top that. You realize that?
I have to admit, that was classic.
That was pretty classic.
It took me some time to think about it.
And we have liftoff at 2:13.
Among all those mid-century images of dutiful wives watching their husbands rocket to glory,
It's a beauty.
the wives of Apollo 12 perhaps sum it up best. Despite all the trials and all the hardships that the wives endured, being a part of the space race still leaves them feeling proud, thrilled, and happy.
I need to sit right here.
At her home in Lynchburg, Virginia, 3-year-old Edie Gilger is more familiar with a doctor's bag than any kid should be. What are you doing first? Ooh, what's that?
It says a stethoscope.
At 6 months old, doctors said she had cancer.
There we go.
They ran these tests and came out and told you what?
Yeah.
That she had stage 4 neuroblastoma. And of course, we had no clue what neuroblastoma was. I mean, we didn't even know at that point that it was a cancer.
For her parents, Nick and Emily, it was bad news to be sure.
Don't worry, diagnosis.
But Edie's still here, and she owes that to advanced research and, in a small way, to another little girl with the same disease, whom she'll never meet.
It's hard to explain.
Alex Scott was diagnosed just shy of her first birthday. We first met Alex and her parents, Liz and Jay, in the summer of 2003.
Can you sum up what it's been like these past 6 years?
Not quickly.
For Alex, none of the standard treatments, like chemotherapy, worked for very long. So, like most childhood cancer patients in this country, she was given experimental treatments to keep her alive. Even as a kid, Alex knew that all those clinical trials cost real money, so she told her parents she wanted to open a lemonade stand on her front lawn, with the money going to finding a cure. On her first day, she raised $2,000.
Why did you decide to do this lemonade stand?
Because I wanted to help raise money for cancer research.
Why is that important to you?
Because it's helping people.
As her story got out, Alex's stand became an annual event in her Philadelphia neighborhood and beyond. By the summer of 2004, Alex and her friends across the country had raised close to $1 million. But even as the money poured in, Alex herself was running out of time. For Liz Scott, it's as painful now as it was then.
It became very hard to see treatment after treatment fail and to have her cancer spreading to places that we knew there was no turning back.
On the first day of August 2004, Alex Scott died. She was 8 years old. Her parents vowed not to let her dream of finding a cure die with her.
Who wants some lemonade? Can we interest you in some lemonade for Alex's lemonade stand?
Alex Scott's Little Lemonade Stand has become the Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation, having now raised more than $70 million. I've continued to follow the Alex's Lemonade story over the years and volunteer at their annual fundraiser. So far, Alex's foundation has helped pay for nearly 300 cancer studies, some of them here at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia.
But there was an aha moment.
One of Alex's doctors, Yael Mosey, and her team studied a link between cancer and a hereditary genetic mutation in a gene called anaplastic lymphoma kinase, or ALK. This mutated ALK gene seems to make certain types of cancer grow.
So we kind of had a hypothesis in the lab that if we could turn it off, it may turn off the growth of the cancer. It's like the fuel for the cancer.
And this can sometimes turn off that mutated ALK gene. It's called crizotinib, a drug already used to successfully treat lung cancer in adults. Mosé says that drug therapies like crizotinib only go after very specific types of cancer and can do a lot of good for small groups of patients.
We have to be smarter than just giving drugs that kill rapidly dividing cells. We have to give drugs that are turning off something that's driving the cancer.
So, using money from Alex's lemonade stand and other sources, doctors were able to fast-track a federally funded crizotinib trial for nearly 80 children.
And the younger kids have tolerated it really beautifully.
With few side effects?
With very few side effects.
And what happened?
We saw some pretty dramatic responses in children who have lymphoma that's driven by this gene ALK.
When you say dramatic response, what do you mean?
We saw the cancer go away within days and weeks.
You saw the cancer go away?
Go away completely.
It didn't help everyone, but for one group with a very specific type of lymphoma, it made a big difference. One of them was Zach Witt of Berks County, Pennsylvania, who at age 6 was fighting for his life. But after only a few days on crizotinib, Zach got out of his hospital bed, to the amazement of his parents, Pam and John.
We came home within a few days of that, and he got out of the car and got on his bike and started riding his bike. And we just stood at the car and cried. Like, wow. Wow.
Now, 2 years later, Zach is still on the drug and as active as any other kid his age.
He really is a walking miracle.
But miracle is an awfully big word.
For children with this rare form of lymphoma, it's really quite remarkable.
Dr. Peter Adamson heads up the Children's Oncology Group.
Is crizotinib a cure?
Not yet. I think crizotinib, we hope, when added to other treatments, may become a cure, but right now it is a promising treatment for a small number of children with certain cancers.
So it listens to your heartbeat.
And that brings us back to Edie Gilger. After 14 rounds of chemotherapy, Edie's tumor was still growing. And when doctors suggested crizotinib, her parents figured they had nothing to lose.
What did you expect?
I expected it not to work.
Nothing
The
had
chemo
worked.
didn't work. The surgeries didn't work. So I was just sort of like, all right, well, we'll try it. I'll give anything a shot for 3 months.
After only 4 weeks on the crizotinib trial, they gave Edie a routine scan to see if her tumor responded and got what might have been the shock of their lives.
The radiologist called me and said that her surgery was a success and the tumor's all gone. And I said to the radiologist she didn't have surgery. We looked at the pictures again and again, and it became very clear that there was no tumor that we could see.
You double-checked?
We double, triple, quadruple checked.
It is an absolute miracle. No other way to put it.
Again, it wouldn't be a miracle for everyone. Only a small number of patients with Edie's form of cancer responded this well. But for her, it's made all the difference.
Oh, here's the I was looking for it.
She takes crizotinib twice a day.
Come here, babe.
And doesn't seem to mind all the syringes.
6.
Still, it's impossible for the Gilgers or any of the other parents in the study to know if the cancer is gone for good.
Now go get 2 M&Ms.
If the cancer comes back in these cases, does that mean the treatment was a failure?
We don't want to oversell a new treatment, put false hope out there. But every parent who has a child with cancer understands what they're up against. And so when there is reason for hope, hope is very powerful, and we shouldn't stand in its way.
There are new, more promising cancer treatments all the time.
What does it taste like when you take your medicine?
Yucky.
Yucky.
But what makes this story special is that one little girl's life has been touched by another little girl who knew how important it was to have just one more day.
Mommy, can we go in the sprinkler?
I thought it was incredible. I just felt like it made Alex's life make a little more sense.
She'll be coming.
The Gilgers say they'll tell Edie all about Alex Scott someday. They hope it'll be something she can share with her grandchildren.
Coming.
she going to be